Katherine Boyle calls out Apple and American VCs for teaching the CCP America's secrets.
Silicon Valley firms and a lot of tech went to China and not only built up their economy by teaching them manufacturing stuff, but also taught them early stage investing and venture capitalism secrets.
So it wasn't like Apple went to China and they said, oh, these guys know how to manufacture. We're going to give them, like they're going to help us manufacture and achieve our goals. Apple trained all of the people in China to do manufacturing. It was something like 28 million over the course of the last 10 years that they've been there, that they've trained, which is the workforce of California.
That is crazy. That's so many people. Yeah, it was interesting hearing Tim Cook talk about like, hey, I don't know about you guys, but I don't find cheap labor over in China. What I find is highly skilled labor, only to then find out, yeah, you're the reason. So you went over and trained everybody. Listen, worlds move in cycles, and you go globalist, and it's really wonderful for the economy. And then you contract back into protectionist, and then you get out of that phase and you go back to globalist, and you just keep going back and forth. Such is the nature of the human mind. And so humans at scale, this is exactly how they play out. While I can't speak for Apple specifically if they had nefarious things in mind and they were just trying to be predatory, or if they really thought like, oh my God, this is such a huge opportunity. We can build this from the ground up. There's nothing legacy here. We can teach these guys how to be an incredible partner to us. It will introduce them to capitalism. It will bring them more into the sphere of the West. Imagine being able to separate China from Russia. Like it would have just seemed like an unimaginable win in the 90s. Now, admittedly, I was so distantly aware of this, but I remember the WTO riots and I was like, why are people fighting against this? Like, this is dope, man. Why are we mad at China? Like, what did China do to us? Like, come on, like, let's do trade. Let's let everybody win. And I really did not understand the argument. Again, I was not paying close attention, but I didn't understand the argument. So then it's like China rises, becomes a power. As they say, ambition grows in the Eden. And so as China is like, they discover red light, green light capitalism, they're growing, pulling all the people out of poverty. They go from 88% poverty rate to a 1% poverty rate. I mean, just unbelievable, all through capitalism. Incredible. The US starts making investments. US is like, oh man, this is a win for us. We get much cheaper labor. We're teaching them, they're getting better, they're more efficient. Wow, culturally, like these guys are amazing. They're really good at like learning this thing, and then they spread it very fast. And so it's like planting seeds in a garden and they just grow and we can reap all the fruit, right? That was how it felt. And it was like, oh, this is going to lead to this good thing where they're going to be in Western sphere of influence. We're going to be able to get things cheaper. They're coming out of poverty. But what was really happening is like, oh, we see the parts of capitalism we like. We're still down with concentration camps. We're still going to kidnap our CEOs and like disappear them until they agree with us. We're still going to rule with an iron fist. None of that's changed. Thank you for all the secrets. Oh, and by the way, that's been so beneficial. We're just going to make that our business model. Everybody that comes over here to manufacture, we're just going to take all that IP. Thank you. And we realized, oh, wait a second. This did not play out the way that we thought it was. We tried to export freedom. Not everybody wants it. And we just have to embrace that, man. Yeah. Not everybody wants freedom. This is why I want to see us as a nation find all those foreign-born Americans who do believe in our values, find the best and the brightest, and import them into America. I don't expect that to be popular, but because I think that it will actually work, I'm going to keep saying it. But what ended up happening was very different.
She continues.
The interesting stat that this writer notes is that Apple invested, I think, something like $58 billion per year into China so that they could invest in these manufacturing hubs and invest in these factories. And when you compare it to the Marshall Plan, it's something like 2x the entire Marshall Plan.
And for those that don't know, because I had to Google it when I first watched this, the Marshall Plan is the money that we gave to other countries in Europe to rebuild after World War II.
Marshall Plan was dope, man. Yeah. That was like America at its finest.
And Apple paid 2x that into China over the last 10 years.
But without the kind of benefits that we got from the Marshall Plan. That's the problem. And you can't put it all on the feet of Apple. But we ended up turning China into a peer competitor, militarily, economically. And I know some people think that's fine, but like you don't want to create your own competitors.
Divorcing the manufacturing and moving manufacturing out of America into a country is like, it wasn't like they had the people and the systems and the know-how where they were helping us. It was like we made an active choice, or I should say Apple made an active choice to train those people and to give them the knowledge, to give them the know-how of this is how you are going to build. And, until this book came out, I don't think people really recognized just how much capital that American companies were putting into China to train them on things we know how to do.
Is there something there, though, that accountability might be the wrong word, but there is something about American companies trying to get ahead. I understand trying to, maximize profits and beat the competitors and trying to stay active so that way they're not one of those companies that fall off the S&P 500 after 16 years. But this was an active choice, to Katherine Boyle's point of they went into other countries and they said, I'm going to invest here, I'm going to build here, I'm going to make something here, where there were spots in America that probably could have done that. You know, you maybe couldn't have done it in Silicon Valley where the average rent is 1.3 million, but couldn't they go to Podunk, Kansas, where there's farms and hillbillies, and couldn't we upskill them? You know what I mean? Like, couldn't
you could have. The problem is, so their GDP at the time that we got involved was like $250. And when an American's GDP is like $40,000, you're like, bro, it's literally pennies on the dollar. Like, I can give them an incredible middle-class life in China and pay them $20,000 a year, versus to try to give somebody a middle-class existence over here, I'm going to be paying $60,000, $70,000. So it's like, or it might have even been less for $15,000. Because I think the average income or the GDP per capita in China right now is like 15 grand. It's a big difference. And so companies look at that and they're only thinking about right now, today. They forget that over, 20, 30 years, that number is going to go up, 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 up. And then if you're doing something super specialized like Apple's doing, suddenly they become the only people in the world that know how to do it. So now they've got incredible leverage in terms of negotiating power. And so now you've just put yourself in a weak position. That's what a globalist moment is, where everybody goes, oh, let's go get that cheap labor. And then a protectionist moment becomes, oh God, by doing that, we've weakened our own economy. We've created our own competitors. And so now we need to circle the wagons and start focusing inward again. We'll do that. And that will go for, we'll see how many decades. And then we will, once again, as the economy starts getting strong and everybody's feeling good and you've got a thriving middle class again, then we're going to be like, oh man, y'all are too expensive. And then we'll start looking for, where is that next place where we can get the cheap labor?
I don't think it was businesses' fault. I think government has become calcified and doesn't let us build private railroads, private power plants, more condos, apartments, more whole cities. We could be building and constructing so many more jobs.
Yes. 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 As I was writing the why rent controls are terrible, literally devastating, I realized just how many times throughout history, here and abroad, we have had to learn the hard lesson. If you try to control rents, it ends up decreasing supply, increasing the cost of rents, lowering the quality. And guess how? Universally, you solve that problem. You reduce regulations, and now you let people build, and all of a sudden an equilibrium will be found. So Houston, Texas has an unusual building policy. They'll basically let anybody build whatever they want. And so guess what? Housing prices have remained affordable. Just $270K. LA, that number is, I think, $950K. And in the Bay Area, it's $1.3 million. So it is a wild difference between if you try to really limit supply or you let people build and let the free market slap around builders who are like, you overbuilt, and they will go broke. I mean, it just is what it is.
I don't know. This rubs me the wrong way. I'm talking about this situation with Apple because it's giving me like NAFTA vibes, how I understand low skill manufacturing somewhere else would be pennies on the dollar, but it did hurt the middle class, because the same can be said about the Ford assembly lines with a lot of cars. That was kind of a low wage thing, and then that went to other countries because it was cheaper to do it over there. So offshoring became a thing. It's as much as this video that Katherine was talking about is on Apple and Silicon Valley, but there were other industries that also were like, yeah, well, we can do our manufacturing over here. Yeah, we can source our fruit and food over here. Yes, we can source material from these different countries. And before we know it, the low skill wages that we actually had in America became hollowed out. So now there's this gap between a couple of years ago where you can work at the assembly line, you could work at the coal mine, you could work at these places. Those jobs fundamentally don't exist anymore. And it seems like now that lower, poor class is kind of gone now.
Everything is a trade-off. The way the game works is you have consumers. Consumers want those goods cheap as possible. So companies go, cool, I'm going to get you that good for as cheap as possible. And I'm going to do the hard work of going to China, setting up a factory, all of that. But I'm going to be able to bring you those goods back cheap. People start clapping. Some people go, hold on a second, I'd rather have jobs. I don't want cheap goods. I want to be able to work and earn a living. And so when you send that overseas, I'm very angry. So you say, okay, well then we'll keep the jobs here. And then people go, but I want the goods cheaper. And I don't care about that because I'm a white collar worker. And so I don't care if people have blue collar jobs. I want my cheap stuff. My kids aren't going to be working in a factory. Thank you very much. So I don't care about that. Then you get people like me who are like, I don't even have kids. So I'm certainly not worried about the factory. But what I am worried about is China is going to be a problem. You're making a peer military economic competitor. They are going to weaken our position in the world. They're going to ruin our economy if given the chance, because Our debt is so insane that if the rest of the world turns its back on our dollar, we are screwed. It is game over for the US. Do I want it to be game over for the US? No, I do not. So you have all of these. Again, this goes back to the physics of how these economies and international relationships work. They are extremely complicated, intertwined phenomena. And when people pretend that they're not, we run into the situation that we're in. And so you've got to think of this as all levers that you want to pull a little bit, but you got to be a little bit careful. So the US government should be putting a ton of, I won't say regulations, but they should be putting pressure on international companies not to like do this solo investing in these places so that we don't have the ability to manufacture the things that matter here. So the government should be doing things that they can to encourage companies like Anduril as weapons manufacturers to keep that stuff here so that we don't lose military competitiveness. They should be doing things to incentivize the life out of energy creation and AI for sure to keep it on our shores. They are going to have to play defense a bit and be restrictive with different countries, especially China, with areas where we don't want them to be competitive with us. And you've got to do cool things to try to keep tensions from just escalating by doing trade on the things that neither of you are mad about the other person getting. And it is a very difficult dance. This is why there's no simple answers. Go do this and it will work. It's like you're doing a very complicated game of Jenga.
Does the government have a responsibility to stop offshoring? I know that's it's an easy thing to punch down on because
be
in
careful.
hindsight we're 2020, but like that equivalent is happening right now in some other industry that 20 years from now we're going to look back and be like, well, in 2025 we allowed this to happen and this was a second order consequence that we didn't see.
The government needs to think of itself as creating soil, not picking crops. I'm the government. My job is to create a regulatory environment where crops will thrive, but where crops are chosen, what's chosen to plant happens at the individual level. We call them entrepreneurs, corporations, but you want anybody other than the government doing that. But you want an environment where tax dollars are being used efficiency to create things like infrastructure, education, for the love of God, that we're just watching like a hawk, the middle class. Do we have a middle class? Are they thriving? Not having a middle class hurts everybody. It hurts the middle class, obviously, hurts the poor, hurts the rich. Like everybody's in a worse position. Like you just want that nice even bell curve. There should be rich people. The second you try to flatten everything out, what you end up doing is flattening everybody at zero. It's the only place that you can get equal outcomes. You want to avoid monopolies so that there is competition. You want to not take so much of the tax revenue or so much of the revenue in the form of tax that companies can invest in themselves. You want them to be able to take insane financial risks because they have that, because what they're going to be spending the money on is innovation. You want to train people to understand the stock market, because as long as we're going to have printing of money, as long as we're going to be using debt in the reckless way that we're using it, people need that way to escape. Focus on innovation. Make sure your policies lead to a thriving middle class. Make sure that your companies literally dominate the world over, and that's sort of directionally correct. But if you think that what the government is supposed to do is pick winners, you're in dangerous territory.